Well, hello again and welcome along to another ICT video blog. Dave Robson here again. I'm still Head of Research and Development at ICT. I'm back again with Pekka there, who's an ICT Director. Hi Pekka.
Hello Dave.
And we're back again in the latest instalment to talk about the Money Laundering Officers Discussion Group. So without further ado, Pekka, you've got a few highlights for us, I gather. So where should we start?
Yeah, Dave, thanks. Well, as you know, I think by now we have a regular forum where we get together and share best practice amongst about 25 regulated firms of AML practitioners. And we had our meeting recently in March. So in terms of hot topics, I guess probably number one of the agenda again was just a standing item, which was keeping a watching brief on the fourth EU AML directive. And we're waiting the final text, which is going to be sometime in April. But it's pretty clear the discussion was ranging around simplified due diligence. And effectively, the message coming out of the UK's MLODG is that simplified due diligence is gone, but firms can still adopt a risk-based approach. So effectively, there still will be simplified due diligence, but it'll have to be risk assessed on a case-by-case basis. So our local guidance in the UK, the MLODG, is going to be updated once we get a final version of the directive. And of course, as far as we know, these appendices in the European Union directive with examples of simplified due diligence features and products are still going to be available as well. So that was probably just one item of discussion. Another really interesting area of focus was a massive issue for the UK, which is, as of 6th of April, there's going to be a radical change to pensions laws in this country, and effectively people will be able to take out their pension pots a lot earlier. So in terms of the drawdown products that are available, the discussion was around whether firms would be reassessing the AML risk of these products. And I guess the answer to that was effectively nothing was specifically changing, but the focus was very much on training of staff and awareness about things like investment scams, and particularly being the emphasis on third-party payments. Now, obviously, there's two angles here. We have a lot of firms in the life industry who are the product providers. Mostly we have a lot of members who are banks as well. And again, the banks are looking very closely at this because they'll obviously be seeing possibly payments linked to attempted fraud as well. So a lot of firms are doing alert notices out to individual customers when they inquire about their pension funds. The FCA, UK regulators, put out a paper recently to firms advising them to be aware of fraud. And there certainly are conversations going on between the life providers and pension provider companies and the banks about reviewing their transaction monitoring systems. The concern is that there are legions of fraudsters hovering over their keyboards in internet cafes all over the world, waiting for the opportunity to target, perhaps vulnerable UK pensioners who feel like they can now liberate their money and effectively take them for a ride in terms of scams and frauds.
I think that's probably true, isn't it, Pekka? That these opportunities present themselves for the determined financial criminal, and changes such as this, and unfortunately, while they're going to be beneficial for many, there's also going to be people who want to take nefarious advantage of it as well. I mean, in terms of going a bit broader, then Sanctions was also on the agenda again.
Yeah, sanctions are always a hot topic of discussion. So I've just done a new blog on sanctions and training around sanctions specialists and some of the new work we're doing at the ICT and ICA on sanctions. And it really is a grey area, I think, sanctions, Dave, in terms of, I guess, a lot of it is making judgment calls on particular payments or customer types. So, for example, we spoke about how far do members go back in screening beneficial ownership for sanctions exposures for corporate entities. So, for example, one corporate is owned by another corporate, who in turn is owned by another. I mean, is there a finite limit to the number of layers people would peel back? And, basically what we know that the OFAC puts out issues on aggregation, where over 50% of ownership of individuals who are SDNs is taken to be effectively making the entity an SDN itself. But the banks tend to go as low as 10% ownership for AML purposes. But for sanctions, it's more grey because it's really about whether that person has a controlling interest. So some firms, there was a mixed approach. Some firms do go back and screen back to UBOs of all UBOs. And, you know, again, there's a lot of increased requests from banks for asking life providers to screen their underlying clients before they grant credit facilities as well. So I think the message is that firms are looking at this very closely, particularly in light of the rapidly moving situation with Russia, and a lot of the judgments around corporate structures and UBOs are not as black and white as perhaps they are with traditional AML, if you like.
So I think that's really useful to know. I think PEPs is another perennial hot topic, isn't it? A quick update on that for us.
Yes. So again, the question came up around PEPs as to how many of our members have the effectively provision that once a PEP, always a PEP, and I would say in my experience, smaller firms tend to adopt the provision of once a PEP, always a PEP from a simplicity perspective. You know, obviously it means that they can, keep their training and their processes simple. But obviously, if you're a tier 1 institution and you never ever, de-PEP a customer, you're going to end up with a vast rump of, business which requires regular enhanced due diligence and lots of regular reviews. So, effectively, we talked about one firm who would do a materiality consideration as well, and they would also look at the type of product and service that the PEP had. And obviously PEPs will be categorised as either high or low risk, because not all PEPs are created equal, are they? You have some very low risk PEPs, other higher risk PEPs. And we did talk about many firms who have a declassification process for PEPs, but it has to go through a formalised, documented process involving senior management and financial crime. And certainly the larger firms will do this in a committee structure. The new 4th EU directive talks about, as a minimum, the earliest you could consider declassifying someone as a PEP as being 18 months. And I think most firms that do declassify PEPs do it only when they are, not the word relaxed is not the word I'm looking for, but when they're extremely comfortable that relationship, and particularly the wealth involved in that relationship, do not pose any higher risk of money laundering or bribery and corruption. So one other thing that did come up actually was, what measures do firms take to validate adverse media results against PEPs? So I'm sure many of our viewers will be aware that regulators have been critical of banks failing to take into account credible adverse media. But one example I thought was a really powerful one was given about a Russian, effectively asylum seeker who the authorities in Russia under Mr. Putin are seeking to extradite, and the UK government has granted him political asylum. Now, the firms involved with this individual have taken the view that, given that the UK government has refused to extradite the individual, that the adverse media is effectively politically motivated, and therefore have declined to give it perhaps the weight of, say, an independent, if you like, journalistic source, even though the allegations relate to, alleged bribery and corruption. But I think the consensus was absolutely that the media needs to be considered on a case-by-case basis and thoroughly documented, so you've got, obviously, a robust audit trail to evidence that you gave it adequate consideration. And again, it's going to come back to, defining what is credible. Again, there was a discussion about, do members always regard non-domestic PEPs as high risk? And again, the answer was no, not necessarily. It'll all come back to judging PEPs on a case-by-case basis, and certainly this concept of materiality comes into play. What is the nature of the products and services that PEP has? And we also discussed the concept of the recent, FATF reports, guidance for reporting institutions about proceeds of corruption, which has some guidance around this. One thing that was quite interesting, We also had a discussion about how wide members go in terms of family members and close associates. And one interesting thing that did come up, we know that the FATF interpretive guidance specifically includes mistresses as being family members. And there is a very high profile case of the James Abori case in the UK, where Mr Abori, former state governor of the Niger Delta region of Nigeria, is now in jail in the UK for laundering the proceeds of corruption, along with his UK-based lawyer, a former banker, and his mistress. So, you know, that was an interesting one. The message was really FATF recommendation 7 is where to go, and that has some fairly detailed guidance with interpretive notes. And the consensus was, if you become aware of these links, you should consider them on a case-by-case basis, not merely just rely on what a third-party vendor's screening systems tell you. So that, Dave, was probably the debate around PEPs.
Okay, that's brilliant, Pekka, and that's really interesting. I think goes to show the value of networking with your peers and having discussions around these sorts of issues, because it's through the discussions, and we're lucky to be able to feedback through the video blog, that these sort of opinions can come to light, and you can effectively unearth the best practice and all the risks with which you're faced. And just to reiterate, Pekka's blog on sanctions will be out via the websites of ICT and ICA this week. But thank you very much, Pekka, and hopefully we'll see you this time next quarter.
Thanks, Dave. Take care.